Welcome to my channel. Tonight, we're not just telling a story, we're dissecting a moment. A single charged phone call that arrived like a phantom in the quiet hum of a life I thought was settled, a life I thought I understood. My name is Jessica, and I was a woman who curated success like fine art, until a stranger's voice, praising a triumph my own husband barely acknowledged, began to unravel the carefully woven tapestry of my marriage, stitch by silent, resentful stitch. What happens when the applause you crave comes from outside the walls of your own home? And how easily can polite appreciation ignite a spark that threatens to consume everything? Stay with me, because this is the unnervingly quiet beginning of a very loud fall. Before we explore the subtle betrayals and the intoxicating allure of being truly seen, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. You'll want to witness every step of this descent. What validation are you secretly starving for? After a day that had been a symphony of carefully orchestrated tension, a whirlwind of last-minute negotiations with demanding artists, schmoozing with influential critics, and finally, the sweet, intoxicating crescendo of triumph, I was, at last, heading home. The city lights of Boston blurred into streaks of celebratory glitter through the rain-slicked window of the taxi, each one a tiny affirmation of my success. Today, the contemporary art exhibition I'd poured months of my life, my soul, into, Urban Echoes, a provocative exploration of city life and alienation, had opened to what could only be described as a resounding success. The gallery, my gallery, buzzed with an electric energy. People, a sophisticated, engaged crowd, were not just looking, they were seeing. They were discussing, debating, asking insightful, challenging questions, their faces illuminated by the carefully positioned track lighting, their voices a low, appreciative hum that was music to my ears. And of course, the ever-present society reporters, a necessary evil in my world, clicked away with their intrusive flashes, capturing moments, manufacturing narratives, anointing the event with the sheen of cultural significance. It was, in no uncertain terms, my victory. Maybe not the grandest, most earth-shattering triumph in the grand, often pretentious scheme of the international art world. But for me, Jessica, a woman who had carved out her niche with relentless tenacity and an unwavering belief in the power of art to provoke and illuminate, it was deeply, personally significant. I felt a profound, almost visceral satisfaction, a potent cocktail of relief and exhilaration coursing through my veins, leaving me energized, almost vibrating, despite the bone-deep exhaustion that always followed such monumental efforts. My mind was already racing ahead, eagerly anticipating, almost childishly, sharing the myriad details of this glorious, validating evening with Alex, my husband, my partner, the man who was supposed to be my anchor in the often turbulent seas of my ambitious life. I envisioned us curled up on our comfortable leather sofa, a celebratory glass of wine in hand, as I recounted every anecdote, every accolade, every subtle nuance of the successful launch. When I finally let myself into our usually serene minimalist apartment, an oasis of calm high above the city's relentless thrum, everything seemed, on the surface, to be exactly as it usually was on any given weeknight. The scent of Alex's perpetually brewing coffee hung faintly in the air, a familiar, usually comforting aroma. The soft glow of his oversized monitor cast long dancing shadows across the open-plan living space. Alex sat, as he so often did, hunched over at the large antique mahogany table we'd ambitiously repurposed as a shared workspace. His eyes, those intelligent, once-adoring blue eyes, laser-focused, almost welded to the flickering complexities of his laptop screen. A curt, high-pitched, almost monosyllabic hi, delivered without him even bothering to look up, without a fractional turn of his head, sounded disconcertingly automatic, almost robotic, utterly devoid of even a hint of genuine interest, warmth, or human engagement. It was the verbal equivalent of a pre-programmed screensaver. "Hi," I replied, my voice, despite my best efforts to inject a note of forced cheerfulness, sounding small, flat, almost lost in the vast, sudden emptiness of the room. I felt my earlier hard-won excitement, that buoyant champagne bubble effervescence, begin to slowly, almost painfully, drain away, like air leaking from a pricked balloon, leaving behind a familiar, heavy, sinking feeling of deflation, of disappointment. I stood there in the open doorway, my designer handbag slipping from my suddenly numb fingers, my expensive silk coat feeling suddenly too heavy, too constricting, as if I were on the very verge, the very precipice of something profoundly, terrifyingly important, something unspoken yet monumental. I waited, but for what precisely? For his attention, freely, spontaneously given? For a single, upward glance, a momentary break in his intense, screen-focused concentration? For a few, simple, heartfelt words that might, just might, show that he cared, even remotely, about my achievements, my passions, my inner world, the things that made me, me. It seemed, with a sudden, crushing, almost unbearable clarity, that this was nothing more, nothing less than a naive, almost pathetic, endlessly recurring, utterly futile hope. A hope I apparently hadn't yet learned to extinguish, despite years of evidence to the contrary. The silence stretched, taut and uncomfortable, filled only by the relentless, almost aggressive, staccato tapping of his fingers on the keyboard, a soundtrack to our growing, unspoken estrangement. "The exhibition opened today," I finally ventured, my voice sounding unnaturally bright, almost brittle, in the heavy silence, trying with a desperation that shamed me to remind him, to prompt him, though I knew, with a certainty that ached deep in my bones, that there was absolutely no need. Of course, he knew. I'd mentioned this day, this crucial, career-defining day, over and over and over again for weeks, for months. My mounting excitement, my escalating anxiety, a constant, unavoidable refrain in our increasingly sparse, increasingly perfunctory conversations. Alex nodded, a barely perceptible, almost dismissive movement of his head, still without lifting his intense, unwavering gaze from the hypnotic, demanding glow of the laptop screen. "That's good," he said, his voice flat, neutral, almost disinterested, as if for formality's sake, as if ticking off an item on a mental checklist of spousal obligations. "How did it go?" he added, an almost obligatory, clearly uninterested afterthought. I moved further into the room, sinking, with a weariness that was more emotional than physical, into the Eames chair directly across from him, desperately, foolishly hoping to catch his eye, to see even a fleeting, fractional flicker of genuine, unfeigned interest, of human connection, in their usually expressive, now maddeningly obscured, depths. But his fingers, long, capable, and maddeningly oblivious, continued their relentless, almost furious, rhythmic tapping away on the keyboard, a frantic, almost desperate dance of productivity, giving me absolutely no chance, no opening, no encouragement to actually respond, to share my news, to bask, even for a moment, in the reflected glow of his potential pride. "Not bad," I replied briefly, my voice clipped, almost curt, realizing with a fresh, bitter, almost soul-crushing wave of familiar disappointment that any further, more detailed recounting of my triumphant, validating evening would be utterly, completely, laughably pointless. A futile exercise in unilateral emotional investment. Did he really, truly, even remotely want to know? Or was this just another empty conversational placeholder? Another meaningless time-filling ritual in the slow, agonizing, unacknowledged death of our once vibrant, once intimate marriage? "Great," he muttered, his attention still, with an almost insulting single-mindedness, completely, utterly, almost religiously, absorbed by the complex lines of code, the intricate financial models, the demanding, unforgiving digital world that now, it seemed, held far more allure, far more significance, far more of his precious, finite attention than his living, breathing, ostensibly successful, yet increasingly, desperately, emotionally starved wife. "That's really great, Jess. I really need to finish this critical project. The deadline is looming, sometime next week, I think. It's a killer." I stayed silent, a heavy, bitter, almost metallic taste palavras in my mouth, swallowing with a practiced, almost effortless ease born of long, painful repetition, the familiar, acrid bitterness of his casual, unthinking, yet deeply wounding indifference. This wasn't by any stretch of the imagination the first time this particular soul-destroying scene had played out between us, and I knew, with a chilling, heart-sinking certainty that settled like a cold, heavy stone in the pit of my stomach, that it most assuredly, most tragically, wouldn't be the last. Alex, always, almost pathologically absorbed in his demanding, high-powered, all-consuming work as a sought-after financial analyst, a veritable wizard of Wall Street, hardly ever, it seemed, saw me, his wife of 15 years, the mother of his child, as anything more, anything deeper, anything more significant than a quiet, unobtrusive, conveniently present companion somewhere in the near vicinity, a silent, undemanding fixture in the background of his intensely focused, intensely ambitious, intensely solitary life. Lately, in the quiet, lonely, introspective moments that were becoming increasingly, alarmingly frequent, I'd felt, with a growing, undeniable, almost terrifying conviction, like I was just a part of his meticulously organized, rigidly structured life, a familiar, predictable, easily overlooked, easily ignored piece of domestic furniture, a convenient, low-maintenance, utterly unexciting fixture, something stable, constant, and utterly, completely, almost insultingly, taken for granted in a wider, more exciting, more demanding world that, quite frankly, didn't seem to matter, to register all that much to him anymore, if it ever truly had. He didn't need, didn't want, didn't solicit the messy, inconvenient, time-consuming details of my day, of my life, of my inner world. He required neither my hard-won joys nor my quiet, private disappointments, just my silent, unobtrusive, undemanding, almost invisible physical presence in the shared, yet increasingly unshared space of our beautiful, yet emotionally sterile home. I rose with a sigh so soft, so resigned, it was almost inaudible even to my own ears, and walked, with a weariness that felt centuries old, over to the large floor-to-ceiling window that offered a breathtaking, yet tonight, strangely mocking, panoramic view of the glittering, indifferent city. I sank gratefully into the plush, welcoming, familiar embrace of the worn, comfortable leather armchair nestled in the corner, my silent, solitary sanctuary, my thinking spot. Outside, The myriad vibrant evening city lights shone brightly, almost defiantly, beckoning, alluring, almost tauntingly, subtly, yet powerfully, reminding me that life, real life, passionate life, was indeed still out there, vibrant, teeming, full, infinitely larger, infinitely more interesting, infinitely more rewarding than everything, or rather, the distinct palpable lack of everything, here in this beautifully appointed, yet emotionally suffocating, almost tomb-like room. And me? Why was I, Jessica, a woman of supposed intelligence, of proven capability, of acknowledged success, still stuck here, in this gilded, yet undeniably confining, emotionally barren box, feeling the precious, irreplaceable, unrepeatable days, weeks, months, years of my one, finite, precious life, relentlessly, almost cruelly, slip by, like sand through heedless, indifferent fingers, without true awareness, without genuine connection, without passion, without joy, without even a fleeting, tantalizing spark of genuine, shared, human warmth. Maybe a small, insidious, unwelcome voice whispered from the deepest, darkest recesses of my increasingly troubled mind. Maybe it was because I'd willingly, almost eagerly, almost blindly, walked into this soul-numbing, spirit-crushing routine myself all those years ago, a naive, hopeful young woman trading passion for perceived security, adventure for predictability, a vibrant, uncertain future for a safe, comfortable, yet ultimately, perhaps, stultifying present. Perhaps, in the intervening years, I'd carelessly, almost casually, lost, or perhaps even more damningly, willingly, almost suicidally, surrendered, vital, essential, irreplaceable parts of myself, forgetting, or perhaps deliberately suppressing, those unique, vibrant, quirky, inconvenient pieces that had once, so long ago, in a different, almost forgotten lifetime, so clearly, so joyfully, so authentically, defined me, that had made me, me. For a long, breathless, almost terrifying moment, I froze, physically, emotionally, spiritually, caught, almost paralyzed, almost impaled by the sheer, unexpected, brutal force of this sudden, unwelcome, yet undeniably, terrifyingly resonant self-realization. We were, Alex and I, by all outward appearances, by all societal metrics, the perfect, enviable, almost cliché couple, stable, predictable, financially secure, enviably, almost irritatingly, settled. I used to be, I recalled with a pang of poignant, almost unbearable nostalgia, so incredibly, almost fiercely, proud of that very stability, that very predictability, that very settledness. It had felt for a long, long time like a hard-won, precious achievement, a safe, secure harbor in the often stormy, unpredictable seas of life. But somewhere, somehow, almost imperceptibly, along the winding, often treacherous, frequently disappointing way, I'd lost myself, my true, authentic, passionate self, almost completely, almost irrevocably. I had, undoubtedly, made a choice, a series of choices, that had led me to this precise, uncomfortable, deeply unsatisfying point. But what, exactly, what specifically, was that choice? A conscious, noble sacrifice for the sake of family, of stability, of a greater shared good. A pragmatic, sensible, adult compromise, a mature acceptance of the inherent limitations, the inevitable disappointments of long-term commitment? Or something far less noble, far more insidious, far more self-destructive? A slow, cowardly, almost imperceptible surrender to fear, to complacency, to the soul-numbing, spirit-crushing tyranny of the comfortable, the predictable, the unthreateningly, damnably safe. At that very precise, existentially charged, almost unbearably poignant moment, a shrill, insistent, almost aggressive, almost accusatory, ringing from my carelessly discarded cell phone, abruptly, almost violently, interrupted my increasingly dark, increasingly self-recriminatory, increasingly desperate thoughts, shattering the fragile, heavy silence of the room. I picked up with a slight, almost uncharacteristic hesitation, unsure for a fleeting, disorienting second who it might possibly be at this relatively late, ostensibly private hour. An unknown, unfamiliar number, a number not programmed into my usually meticulously organized contacts, flashed almost accusingly on the small, bright screen. A sharp, clear, confident, undeniably masculine voice, a voice I vaguely, yet with a sudden, unexpected, almost unwelcome jolt of recognition, recalled cut with an almost surgical precision through the thick, almost tangible fog of my melancholic, self-absorbed thoughts.
Jessica, hi, it's Graham Sterling. We met, briefly, I believe, at the exhibition earlier this evening. I just wanted to call and thank you, personally, for the quite extraordinary evening. It was really something quite special.
Quite memorable. Graham, of course.
Graham Sterling, the gallery's newest and potentially most influential, most disruptive investor. A recent, almost last-minute addition to our somewhat staid, somewhat predictable board of benefactors. A man known in certain circles for his astute business acumen, his occasionally ruthless tactics, and his surprisingly, almost incongruously genuine, deeply knowledgeable passion for contemporary, often challenging, avant-garde art. I remembered him, vaguely at first, then with a gathering, surprising clarity from the earlier, chaotic, overwhelming blur of the opening night reception. He was there, a distinct, almost magnetic presence amidst the usual, somewhat interchangeable, often pretentious throng of gallery guests, exuding an aura of quiet, understated, yet undeniable confidence. Perhaps even, I had thought at the time, a touch of almost regal arrogance, but not, crucially, not in that overtly ostentatious, gratingly self-important, annoyingly patronizing way that so many of our regular, older, more established, often excruciatingly boring patrons unfortunately, almost invariably, possessed. There was something else there too, something sharp, something keen, something almost unsettlingly, yet undeniably, intriguingly, inquisitive in his direct, unwavering, almost piercing gaze. The gaze of a man I had fleetingly, almost subconsciously registered, who sees, who chooses to see, far beyond the superficial, socially acceptable surface. A man who actively, almost obsessively, searches for, perhaps even demands, something genuine, something authentic, something real, in a world so often, so tragically, so disappointingly, dominated by artifice, by pretense, by carefully constructed, ultimately empty facades. Oh, Graham, yes, of course, Graham.
Thank you so much for calling. That's very thoughtful of you. I'm so glad, truly glad that you enjoyed the exhibition. I replied, my voice, to my own surprise, sounding suddenly, almost miraculously, softer, warmer, more animated, more genuinely engaged than it had in what felt like a veritable eternity. I felt a strange, unexpected, almost illicitly pleasurable warm flicker stir somewhere deep, somewhere long dormant, somewhere almost forgotten, within the usually tightly controlled, professionally disciplined, emotionally barren landscape of my inner world. Enjoyed it, he chuckled, a low, rich, surprisingly attractive sound that sent an unexpected, unwelcome, yet undeniably pleasant shiver down my spine. My dear Jessica, enjoyed it is, if you'll permit me to say so, a rather colossal, almost comical understatement. You, and your team, of course, did an absolutely, unequivocally outstanding job. A truly remarkable achievement. I could see, almost physically feel, how much of your heart, how much of your soul, how much of your very essence you poured, almost literally, into this incredibly ambitious, incredibly moving project. That kind of passion, that kind of commitment, that kind of authenticity is, in my admittedly extensive, often jaded experience, exceptionally, almost vanishingly, rare to see, especially in this often cynical, often mercenary art world of ours. It was truly deeply inspiring. His words, so unexpected, so direct, so overwhelmingly, almost embarrassingly positive, hit me with the force of a physical blow, a delightful, yet shocking, almost concussive impact. He noticed that. He, a relative stranger, a new investor, a man known for his discerning, often critical eye, had actually seen that. He had seen, had understood, had appreciated the sheer, unadulterated, almost fanatical volume of myself, of my very being, that I'd so willingly, so completely, so almost recklessly poured, almost bled, into this all-consuming, career-defining exhibition. Why, a small, treacherous, almost bewildered voice whispered in my head, why did these unsolicited, unexpected words of praise from a near stranger feel so incredibly, so disproportionately, so almost life-affirmingly different, so much more meaningful, so much more resonant, so much more real than Alex's casual, dismissive, almost obligatory, utterly perfunctory great, just a few short, agonizing, soul-crushing minutes before. Thank you, Graham, I replied, trying with all my might to mask, to conceal the undeniable, almost embarrassing hint of profound, almost desperate surprise, and an even more profound, even more desperate, almost shameful sense of overwhelming, almost tearful relief that I knew, with a sickening certainty, must be clearly, unmistakably audible in my suddenly trembling, suddenly unsteady, suddenly, wonderfully, dangerously alive voice. It was a very important, very personal project for me, for all of us at the gallery. We talked, easily, almost effortlessly, for a few more surprisingly, delightfully, dangerously engaging minutes, our conversation flowing, meandering, almost dancing, from the specifics of the exhibition to broader, more philosophical discussions about the role of art in modern society, about the artists whose work we both admired, about the subtle, often infuriating politics of the art world. And then, almost without my realizing it, almost without my conscious volition, I felt myself visibly, palpably relax, my shoulders unclenching from their usual defensive CEO mode tightness, my breathing deepening, slowing, my mind, so recently a maelstrom of anxiety and resentment, becoming clearer, calmer, more focused, almost completely, blissfully, wonderfully lost, absorbed in the unexpected, stimulating, deeply satisfying intellectual and emotional currents of our surprisingly, wonderfully, dangerously easy, almost intimate conversation. Graham, with an almost preternatural skill, a seemingly innate gift for genuine, empathetic inquiry, asked with an almost unnerving, yet deeply flattering perceptiveness about my personal views on the often arcane trajectory of modern art, about the specific curatorial choices I had made for this particular challenging exhibition, about my ambitious, still somewhat nebulous, future projects for the gallery, for myself. I couldn't, for the life of me, remember the last time anyone at all, least of all my own husband, had shown so much genuine, unfeigned, deeply engaged, almost palpable interest in what truly, deeply, passionately mattered to me, in the things that ignited my soul, that fueled my spirit, that gave my often difficult, often thankless, professional life its ultimate, transcendent meaning. "It seems, Jessica, if you don't mind my saying so," he observed, his voice now holding a new, softer, almost tender note of genuine, almost respectful interest. "It seems as though you truly, deeply, almost literally, live for this, for art, for this world you've created. It's not just a job for you, is it? It's a calling, a passion, a vocation. That's something quite extraordinary, something to be profoundly respected, something to be deeply admired." I didn't know, for a long, suspended, breathless moment, how to respond, how to react to such an unexpected, such an unmerited, such a profoundly moving, almost overwhelming affirmation from a man I barely knew. His words were simple, direct, unadorned, yet I felt, with an almost visceral, intuitive certainty, that he genuinely, sincerely, deeply meant them, that they weren't just a calculated, manipulative, insincere compliment from a shrewd businessman looking to curry favor. To my own utter, complete, almost shocking surprise, a genuine, unforced, almost forgotten smile, a smile that reached all the way to my usually guarded, usually wary eyes, spread slowly, almost tentatively, yet undeniably across my face, a smile that felt almost alien, almost unfamiliar, yet wonderfully, beautifully, liberatingly real. That's incredibly nice to hear, Graham," I said quietly, my voice still tinged with a lingering, almost incredulous surprise, yet also with a new, unfamiliar, deeply comforting warmth, feeling something warm, something calm, something almost forgotten, something akin to peace, to validation, to hope, stir, expand, blossom, almost miraculously, within the deepest, most protected, most barren recesses of my tired, weary, almost defeated soul. When the unexpectedly long, unexpectedly intimate, unexpectedly, wonderfully, dangerously satisfying conversation finally, reluctantly, almost inevitably, came to its natural yet unwelcome end. And I had, with a strange, unfamiliar, almost poignant sense of regret, hung up the phone, a powerful, disorienting, almost vertiginous wave of profound, almost overwhelming confusion washed, crashed, almost violently over me, leaving me feeling shaken, unsettled, yet strangely,
exhilaratingly, wonderfully, dangerously alive. Someone else, some other man in this vast, indifferent, often cruel world had actually, truly seen my efforts, had recognized my passion, had appreciated my dedication. And it tragically, heartbreakingly, damnably, wasn't my own husband. The man who had once, so long ago, in a different, almost forgotten lifetime, vowed to love, honor, and cherish me all the days of his life. The implications of that single, stark, undeniable, devastating realization were almost too enormous, too terrifying, too catastrophic to fully, consciously bear. What are your takeaways from my story, from my choices, from my imperfect, ongoing, often bewildering journey of self-discovery, and often painful, yet ultimately necessary transformation? Do you believe, truly believe, it's possible to find true, lasting, authentic happiness, genuine, sustainable peace, after causing such profound, widespread, undeniable, collateral hurt, such devastating, often irreparable, emotional damage to those one once loved, perhaps still loves, in some complicated, fractured, imperfect way? Share your wisdom, your insights, your experiences, your questions, your judgments, your hopes, your fears in the comments below. I genuinely, truly, desperately want to hear them, to learn from them, to connect with them. If this story, in all its messy, uncomfortable, inconvenient truth, resonated with you in any way, however small, however fleeting, if it touched a chord, however faint, however discordant, however unwelcome, within your own unique, complex, precious experiences, within your own beautiful, fallible, human heart, please give it a like and consider sharing it with others who might also be navigating their own complex, challenging, often bewildering, frequently painful, yet ultimately, hopefully, growth-inducing emotional landscapes. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more stories, more confessions, more raw, unfiltered, honest explorations of the intricate, often heartbreaking, always compelling, endlessly fascinating, magnificently, terrifyingly, wonderfully complex realities of the human heart.